Hello, my name is Mike Minarcek, and my presentation is entitled Progressive Steps Toward Independence in Afro-Cuban Music for Undergraduate Drum Set Studies. I'm very glad to be a part of this conference, and I thank you so much for watching my presentation, and I hope you find it interesting and useful. Here's a brief performance example of the pattern I'll be examining. It's a mambo with a 2-3 son clave. I hope you enjoy it. Purpose of presentation. The goals of my presentation are simple. First, to show how that with careful examination, slow, methodical practice, and a logical progression of practice materials and persistence can ultimately lead to playing some of the most enjoyable music for percussion instruments, and in this case, the drum set. Secondly, to show that with this step-by-step method, a student with little to no experience can and should introduce it into his or her drum set studies in tandem with their other curriculum. I'm confident that with persistence, a student will greatly enjoy the process of learning these rhythms and ultimately lead to confidence playing it and a broader musical appreciation. Third, to foster a greater appreciation for Afro-Cuban music and Latinx culture. Please note that time will not allow me to examine any historical elements nor the extensive terminology found within this music. This has already been done and much more extensively by others. This project is only intended to aid in performance and the learning process of these patterns. Some of its parts. Two important points to note from the very beginning. First, this particular pattern is only one example of a collection of similar patterns found within the mambo genre. The mambo is only one type of music found in Afro-Cuban grooves. Others include the Mozambique, the 6/8 mbembe or naningo, and the wawanko. Afro-Cuban music, together with Brazilian music, such as the samba or the bossa nova, fall under the umbrella term of Latin music, which to me doesn't really mean anything. There is no Latin music. So I think it's important to try to combat that umbrella term and dig a little deeper with students so they have a better and clearer understanding of where this music comes from. Secondly, it is important to note here that traditional or folkloric Afro-Cuban music does not use a drum set player. Rather, 3 or more percussionists are typically involved. He or she would play bongos, timbales, congas, and multiple small percussion accessories, such as cowbells of various size, güiros, claves, etc. All of these patterns are adapted into one part played on the drum set here. It consists of a mambo bell pattern, which I play on the ride cymbal, a bombo pattern, which I play on the bass drum, a 2/3 son clave, which I will talk more in detail later on, that I play on the left foot on a cowbell. Please note initially, this is an advanced method. The clave does not need to be played on the left foot for these patterns to be studied or to work. And finally, the tumbao pattern, which I play on the snare drum with a cross stick sound, which I will explain in further detail as well, and then the tom and the floor tom. Mambo bell pattern explained. The mambo bell pattern is played by the timbalero or timbale player. The pattern is traditionally in cut time and felt in 2. It is seen sometimes written in 4, but this is not the authentic written version. Below is a music example. Please see the stems up rhythm for now of this pattern. Beneath it is a 2/3 son clave that I will explain further on. Please note that these accents in the stems up rhythm are representing what is traditionally played on the mouth of the cowbell or open edge, and the unaccent notes in that rhythm are played on the top of the bell for two very distinct tones. This helps what I call the buoyancy or forward propulsion of this groove. Without it, if all notes sound accented or if all notes sound unaccented, the groove quickly becomes stagnant. To avoid two contrasting cowbell sounds in the example that I'm playing here, I replicated these two distinct cowbell sounds on the bell and face of the ride cymbal, respectively. Here is what the mambo bell pattern sounds like on the bell and face of the ride cymbal. Bombo and clave explained. The bombo pattern is represented here in the bass drum part. It is the simplest rhythmically of all the parts involved, and it serves as a kind of anchor to this two-measure pattern. As you may have noticed, it only occurs in the first measure. It really is nothing more than this first and second note of the clave pattern, but played in the opposite measure of the clave already ongoing. In Spanish, clave translates roughly to key and serves as the crux for the entire pattern. An old saying, clave is key and the key is clave, is sacred. A potentially confusing aspect here is that the name of the rhythmic key we're discussing, clave, can sometimes be mixed up with the actual percussion instruments, claves, which sometimes play the clave part. There are two distinct types of clave found in Afro-Cuban music. First, though it looks like son clave, is actually pronounced son clave, and the second, rumba clave. These can then be performed in either a 2-3 or 3-2 note grouping. And what this means is that the pattern is in two measures, and either the first measure has two notes and the second measure has three, or vice versa. The first measure has three notes and the second measure has two. The 2-3 son clave sounds like this. 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 E and A 2 E and 1 and 2, 1 E and A 2 E and. That last and that I clapped is the and of 2 in the second measure or 3 side of the son clave. If I shift that note, the and of 2 that is, to the of 2 or fourth partial of 2, it becomes a 2-3 rumba clave. It sounds like this. 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 E and A 2 E and 2, 1 E and A 2 E and Now I'll play them back to back or alternating. Son, rumba, son, and so on. 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 E and A 2 E and rumba and 2, 1 E and A 2 E and son and 2, 1 E and A 2 E and rumba and 2, 1 E and A 2 E and Then if I simply start on the second measure of these patterns and flip them, they become a 3-2 son or a 3-2 rumba clave. And I'll just do a quick example of both. First, the 3-2 son. 1, 2, 1 E and A 2 E and 1 E and A 2 E and 1 E and 2. You'll notice that if I give that a little bit of swing, it becomes the sacred Bo Diddley beat. 1, a bird. Great groove there. Then finally, the 3-2 rumba clave, it just shifts that and of 2 to the of 2 in the first measure, as such. 1, 2, 1 E and 2 E and 2, 1 E and 2 E and 2. Now the decision to use a clave, any of those four, is based entirely on the melody of the tune being played and what all the other instruments are doing. Also, the drum set player, if he's playing solo, will play something different than what he would play if there were other percussionists involved. So there are a lot of decisions to be made, but that's later on in the performance aspect of this and does not really enter in with the learning process of these patterns. Clave examples. The following slide illustrates the two types of clave, son and rumba, in 4/4 meter this time, so you can see how they compare visually to their African 12/8 ancestors. This 12/8 pattern has been referred to as the Mother 12, and when played in a folkloric African setting authentically, it has been played on a hoe blade with a very thick wooden mallet. And you'll see the pattern is very similar, but in a triple subdivision as opposed to a duple one. Please note that rumba clave only differs by one displaced eighth note and cut time. In the following example, however, it's a 16th note on the quote 3 side. Here are the visual examples of the clave. I would like to clap these so you can see how they are similar, but also a bit different. Here's the son clave, the top staff in 4. 1, 2, 3, and a 4. Again, and 4. Now here is the triple-based 12/8 pattern, and I think you can see visually how similar it is. I'm just going to count the big 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here is the rumba clave in 4. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a Here is the 12/8 version of the rumba clave. Again, just the big beats I will count. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 3, 1. So you can see the displacement in the rumba clave of that third eighth note on small beat 6. That's very similar to the of 2 above it. It seems like a subtle difference, but when placed correctly with the melody of a tune, it makes all the difference in the world. Here's a visual example of the 2/3 son clave, and I like this example because it shows how the decision was made for this particular 2/3 son clave because it lines up nicely with the sample melody beneath it. The bomba pattern, which is played in the bass drum here, is simply the first and second notes of the 3-note side of this clave, but it's played in the 2-note measure, the opposite bar. Here's what the feet sound like together. The tumbao rhythm is traditionally played by the conguero, or conga player. Before I continue here, please note that the term conga refers to the set of drums played by the conguero, which can be 1 up to 4 sets of congas. It's also the name of a single drum within that set. When 2 drums are used, typically one drum is called the quinto, and the second lower pitch drum, the conga drum. And again, both drums fit into the set of conga drums. The drum set part is just an adaptation of 2 distinct sounds from this conga part. The open tone of the quinto and conga drum and the muted slap. Without getting into the technicalities of these sounds, I'll simply describe how I translate them to the drum set. The muted slap on the conga, which is a staccato type sound, is translated to the drum set by a cross stick sound, which is the butt end or the thicker mass end of the drumstick contacting the rim of the snare drum, as you can see in my example. The open tone of the quinto and conga drums is mimicked simply by the higher pitched tom-tom and the lower pitched floor tom. Here is that tumbao pattern demonstrated. Points of contact. The following slide is my full list that I've created for all points of contact or connectivity within this pattern and all 4 limbs of the drummer. First, it lists the 2-side connections, followed by those on the 3 side. I then break them down into three categories. First, the right and left hands, or the mambo bell pattern with the tumbao. Secondly, the right hand and feet, or the mambo bell pattern with the bombo and clave. And finally, the left hand, which is the tumbao pattern, and the feet, the bombo and the clave. Each category is to be individually rehearsed, and what I mean by that is, if you can't do both hands at the same time, that's perfectly fine. If something breaks down, take that something out and go back over what works before you put it back in. And don't dare think of adding a foot or another hand if one of the other hands or the other feet isn't quite musical or fluid yet. So combinations are only to be begun once all points of contact are fluid. The following abbreviations are used throughout. OO means open ostinato, and what I mean by that is that pattern, the mambo bell pattern, the open sound, which traditionally we said is over the mouth of the cowbell, but here is the bell of the ride cymbal. And CO is just the opposite, those unaccented notes we discussed earlier on the top of the cowbell, or here, the face of the cymbal. Here's the chart I was referencing. I won't go through this for this presentation, but I do recommend perhaps printing this chart out for your practice sessions. Closing thoughts. This pattern, needless to say, is very complex, and it's difficult for even a professional level player. In my opinion, drum set really does not get much more difficult than this pattern. But however, it's not encouraged to study it simply for its difficulty. The musicality of it, it dances, and it's incredibly fun and rewarding. I am convinced that with slow, focused practice and a systematic approach, a student at the undergraduate level is fully capable of achieving this level of independence. Some key elements to remember here, and that a teacher should insist upon, are good sounds from all parts of the drum set consistently. What this means is if we start to get a bangy or what I call a poundy sound out of the toms, or an inconsistent cross stick sound, or the clave wavers, or if the tempo rushes or drags, I think that's a good point to stop and address some fundamentals and to achieve a light touch and a steady tempo before moving forward. Unless this can be achieved, the good sounds that is, the tempo should not rise above 40 beats per minute to the half note, which is where I begin my students with these patterns. This way, it can be better internalized, and it is actually quicker, though it seems like it takes longer. Last, these patterns do not have to exist in an Afro-Cuban vacuum, meaning you don't have to be in only an Afro-Cuban ensemble to play them. Clave and the mambo bell pattern, just for an example, are fully capable of, quote, spicing up a groove and a funk pattern, a rock groove, and any other commercial styles when the player deems them appropriate. Two excellent books for further study, very in-depth study, are first, Afro-Cuban Rhythms for Drum Set by Frank Malabe and Bob Weiner, and secondly, The Essence of Afro-Cuban Percussion and Drum Set by Ed Uribe. I continue to use these books, and they provide a lifetime of challenge and reward. I could not recommend them highly enough. Thank you so much for your attention to my presentation. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you would like more information or have any questions or comments or criticisms, I'd really love to hear from you. You can reach me through my email address at mike7813@gmail.com. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and take care. Thank you.